There's something funny about hitting 50. You spend decades holding the world together, keeping the job, raising the kids, paying off the mortgage, fixing the sink no one else notices is broken. And when the candles finally add up to that big, round number, you start to expect something. Not a parade, not confetti and fireworks, but maybe a moment, a real one. A pause where the people who orbit your life stop and say, "Hey, thank you. You mattered." But what I got was a folding chair in the corner of my sister's garage, next to a half-eaten Costco sheet cake and a cooler full of warm beer. My name's James, 50 years old. I've always been the quiet one in the family, the reliable one, the guy who says, "Sure, no problem," when you need someone to pick up your kid from soccer practice last minute or drive an hour across town to help you move a couch. The one who brings the extra batteries to Christmas even though no one asked him to. I'm not flashy. I don't make scenes. I was the second oldest of 4 kids, the one who got decent grades and never asked for much. My younger brother, Martin, was the golden child. Football star in high school. Charming, loud, magnetic. People loved him, even when he forgot birthdays or crashed mom's car. My older sister, Diane, was the loud voice of reason, the one who acted like a third parent even when we didn't ask her to. She always had an opinion, and somehow she was always right, at least according to her. I used to think maybe I liked being in the background. It felt safe there, until I realized that being invisible wasn't the same as being safe. My birthday was on a Saturday this year, which felt like some kind of gift from the universe. I hadn't had a proper celebration in over a decade. The last party I'd had was when I turned 40 and my kids made me burnt toast and orange juice in bed. Sweet, but not exactly a milestone bash. So when Diane called me 2 weeks before and said, "Hey, we're putting something together for your big 5-0. Just come over to my place," I'll admit, I smiled. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd do it right this time. The morning of my birthday, I woke up early, as usual. Made coffee, checked the weather, cloudy, chance of rain. I sat on my porch with my mug and tried to picture how the evening would go. Maybe they'd set up something in Diane's backyard with string lights. Maybe they'd get a nice dinner catered. Maybe someone would say something nice. I let myself hope, just a little. When I pulled into Diane's driveway at 5 p.m., I noticed the garage door was open. Tables were shoved to the sides to make room for rows of mismatched plastic chairs. A single happy birthday banner drooped above an old folding table stacked with Domino's pizza boxes and a bowl of off-brand chips. No music, no decorations, no cake that I could see. Martin waved from across the driveway, holding a red Solo cup. "Jimmy, you made it," he shouted, like I was a guest at my own party. I forced a grin and walked over. Of course, wouldn't miss it. Diane came out of the house, wiping her hands on a paper towel. "Hey, birthday boy," she said, giving me a one-armed hug. "You don't mind grilling, do you? We got burgers and hot dogs. Figured you'd want to take the reins." I blinked. "Grill? Yeah, you're the grill master, right?" she said, nudging me toward the old rusted Weber in the corner of the garage. "It's kind of your thing, was it?" I hadn't grilled at a family event in years, unless someone else asked me to. But I nodded and said, "Sure, because that's what I always do." My grandkids were there, at least. They ran up and gave me hugs, their faces smudged with pizza sauce and chocolate. "Grandpa, look," they said, holding up the little party favors, cheap plastic whistles and glow bracelets from a dollar store. I smiled for them, crouched down to take a few selfies, and tried not to let the flicker of disappointment in my chest catch flame. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of lukewarm hot dogs and half-hearted conversations. Diane had put out a sheet cake eventually, vanilla, with "Happy Birthday, James" written in blue icing. I stared at it for a good 10 seconds before Diane burst out laughing. "Oh my God," she snorted. "Look at that. They spelled your name wrong. Classic. Should have checked the box before I left the store." I laughed too, out of habit more than humor. "Yeah, classic." Martin clapped me on the back so hard I almost dropped my plate. 50 years and nothing to show for it. "Huh," he said, grinning. Just kidding. You got those grandkids at least." I looked at him. I mean, really looked at him. His shirt was untucked, beer in hand. The same smug, careless smirk he'd worn since high school. He didn't mean it, not really. But he also did not mean it. I started noticing things after that. Like how none of the group photos had me in them, because I was always behind the camera. Diane kept calling me over to take shots of the family, and I obliged, snapping pictures of cousins and aunts and friends laughing, clinking glasses, holding plates piled high. Nobody ever said, "Hey James, come be in this one." At one point, I sat down on a chair by the corner of the garage and just watched. Nobody noticed. I wasn't bitter yet, not really. Just numb. Like the night had quietly turned into a mirror, and I was seeing something I didn't want to look at too closely. I thought of the hours I'd spent over the years driving people to airports, lending out money, fixing broken sinks, and showing up every time someone called. And here I was, at the party I didn't plan, eating pizza I didn't like, being joked about like I was the family's favorite old shoe. Around 9, I slipped into the house, said goodbye to the grandkids, and left a letter on the mantel. I'd written it that morning. Just a few paragraphs. Honest. Not cruel. But clear. Nobody saw me leave. 2 weeks went by. I didn't hear a word. Then, they opened the letter. And that's when everything changed. I didn't expect a parade after they read the letter. I didn't even expect an apology. But I thought maybe I'd get a phone call. Or a text. Some acknowledgement that someone, anyone, had noticed I wasn't there when the last slice of cake was passed out. That they'd realized my car wasn't in the driveway when they gathered for one last group photo. That they'd wondered, even briefly, why I left early from the party they supposedly threw for me. But the silence? That was worse than any insult. That was confirmation. The first person to reach out wasn't Diane or Martin. It was my daughter, Lily. She called me one night, 2 weeks after the party, sounding hesitant. "Dad," she said, "I saw the letter." My heart sank. "How'd it get to you?" She sighed. Aunt Diane posted a picture of it in the group chat. Said it was peak dramatic energy and that we should all get a laugh. My throat went dry. "She posted the letter?" "Yeah," Lily said. And Martin replied with a popcorn gif. That broke something in me. It wasn't that they disagreed with what I wrote. I could have lived with that. It wasn't even that they thought I was wrong. What crushed me was that they turned my pain, years of it, into a punchline. A meme in the family group chat. The letter wasn't long. It said, in plain language, how I felt invisible. How I'd spent my life showing up for people who never showed up for me. How I didn't expect a parade, just a little effort. A real thank you. A sign I mattered. I ended it with one line. If this was the best you could do after 50 years, I'd rather spend the next 50 with people who see me. Apparently, that was comedy gold. Lily didn't laugh. She didn't join in. In fact, she was the only one who said, "Did anyone actually ask Dad how he's feeling?" Martin responded with, "He's feeling sorry for himself, clearly. 50-year-old midlife crisis." Classic, Diane wrote. "I always knew James was a little sensitive, but this is a bit much." That's the word they always used. Sensitive. Like caring too much was a flaw. Like noticing you've been forgotten was some kind of emotional allergy. After the call with Lily, I took a long walk around my neighborhood. The fall leaves were starting to turn, and the air had that sharp chill that made your breath visible. I remember standing at the edge of the park, watching a dad push his kid on the swings, and feeling something strange. Not sadness, not even anger, just detachment. Like I'd been watching my own life play out from the sidelines, and suddenly I was ready to walk off the field. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Something inside me, something old and buried, was waking up. The next few weeks were quiet. I didn't call anyone. I stopped replying in the family group chat. No one noticed. I watched the messages roll in. Martin sharing a video of his new boat. Diane complaining about the PDA again. Photos of brunches I wasn't invited to. Updates on my niece's dance recital that no one thought to tell me about directly. One Saturday, I saw they'd all gone to the lake house. Our late parents' place. The one we inherited together. The one I'd maintained for the last 5 years because James is good with tools. They'd gone up there without telling me. The photos showed them smiling on the dock, holding beers, standing in front of the house I'd personally reshingled. There was even a picture of my old fishing rod in Martin's hands. He was pretending to cast while Diane laughed in the background. I stared at it for a long time. No one mentioned I wasn't there. No one said, "Where's James?" That's when the idea started forming. But before that, before things really unraveled, came the breaking point. The betrayal, I still have to remind myself, wasn't a dream. It was November, a few days before Thanksgiving. Traditionally, we all did dinner at Diane's house. Everyone brought a dish. I always brought the green bean casserole, Lily's favorite, and I usually helped carve the turkey. I debated whether I should even go this year. Part of me wanted to stay home, curl up on the couch with takeout, and pretend the holiday didn't exist. But then Lily called again. "You should come, Dad," she said gently. For me, not for them. So I did. I showed up 10 minutes early with a casserole in hand and a polite smile on my face. I didn't want drama. I didn't want a scene. I just wanted to be present for my daughter, for the grandkids, for the memory of what family used to mean. Diane answered the door in a cranberry-colored sweater, glass of wine in hand. "Oh," she said, blinking. "You actually came." I forced a laugh. "Well, it's tradition." She looked at the casserole. "Hope you didn't bring the same one as last year." That one was dry. I hadn't changed the recipe. I handed it over without comment. Inside, the house buzzed with the usual noise. TV on in the background, kids running around, the scent of turkey and cinnamon in the air. Martin was already on his second beer, bragging to a group of in-laws about some investment he'd made. When he saw me, he raised his drink. "Hey, look who decided to forgive us," he said, grinning. Must have run out of tissues. I ignored him and headed toward Lily. She gave me a warm hug and whispered, "Just breathe. I'm glad you're here." Dinner started off tense. I kept my head down. I helped with the carving. I made polite small talk. Diane had arranged the seating, and I noticed, very deliberately, that I was placed at the far end of the table, between two of Martin's loudest in-laws. Every time I tried to speak to Lily or the grandkids, the conversation shifted away. Then came dessert. Or, more accurately, the moment. Diane stood and tapped her glass with a spoon. "Before we cut the pie," she said, smiling too wide, "I just want to say a few words." My stomach clenched. "I know this year's been interesting," she continued, glancing at me. "But at the end of the day, family is family. Even when certain members get a little theatrical." Polite chuckles rippled through the room. "I mean, really," she added. "We've all had tough birthdays, right? You don't see me writing dramatic letters and storming off." Martin piped up. "Yeah, James, I didn't get a golden chariot on my 50th either." More laughter. "And honestly," Diane went on, "if you're going to take yourself that seriously, at least spell check the letter first." I stood. I didn't say a word. I just stood, chair scraping back. "Oh, come on," Martin said, raising his glass. "Don't be like that, Jimmy. We're just teasing. Lighten up." But I didn't move toward the door. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. I placed it on the table, right in front of Diane. She looked down at it, confused. "What's this?" "You'll see," I said quietly. Then I turned to Lily. "I'm sorry." And I left. Behind me, the room buzzed with confusion. Martin called after me. Diane started opening the envelope. But I was already down the front steps, already in my car, already driving away from that house like it was a collapsing building, and I was walking out just before the roof caved in. The envelope didn't contain a letter. It contained something much more shocking. And when they finally realized what I'd done, the family would never look the same again. It's strange how quiet the world gets when you stop trying to be heard. The weeks after Thanksgiving passed like fog, thick, slow, muffled. I didn't go to Christmas. Didn't respond to texts. Diane tried calling once, probably out of panic after opening the envelope, but I let it ring out. I figured they'd either come to terms with what happened or twist it into another punchline. Either way, I was done explaining myself to people who weren't really listening. I wish I could say I felt triumphant. That driving away from that dinner table with my head high and my envelope on the linen runner was the moment I claimed my power. But that's not how it felt. The truth? I felt hollow, numb, lonely, because the breaking point doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with silence. There were nights I'd sit on my porch with a blanket around my shoulders and wonder if I'd overreacted. If maybe they were right. Maybe I was sensitive. Maybe I was making something big out of something small. That little voice, familiar and cruel, kept whispering, "You're the common denominator, James. Maybe you're the problem." But then I'd remember Diane holding up my letter like a joke in the group chat. Martin calling me Jimmy, like I was still 15 and stuck under his shadow. The photos at the lake house without me. The plastic chair in the garage. The gift card with my name spelled wrong. No, I wasn't overreacting. I was just finally reacting. Hitting rock bottom doesn't always look like screaming or crying. Sometimes it looks like staring at your phone for hours, not because you're waiting for a message, but because no one's messaging you at all. Sometimes it's walking through a grocery store and realizing you haven't said a word out loud in 2 days. Sometimes it's watching the world move on without you and wondering if you ever really mattered to it in the first place. But in that quiet, something started to shift. It started with a visit from Lily. She knocked one Saturday afternoon, holding a bag of takeout and 2 bottles of iced tea. "Figured you haven't eaten anything green this week," she said with a soft smile. I didn't even try to pretend otherwise. I stepped aside and let her in. We ate in silence for a while, sitting on my couch with the TV playing quietly in the background. Then she said, "They're freaking out, you know." I glanced at her. "About the envelope?" She nodded. "Especially Diane. She keeps texting me, asking if I think you're serious. Martin said you're bluffing." I smiled a little, for the first time in days. "Let them guess." Lily studied me. "Was that always the plan? Just drop that and walk away?" I looked down at my hands. It wasn't a plan, not at first. It was just, finally putting something down after carrying it too long. "You don't have to tell me what it was," she said, gently. "But, you look lighter." That sat with me. Lighter. Not happier. Not better. But lighter. After Lily left, I found myself pulling out an old notebook from the desk drawer. One I hadn't touched in years. It had pages filled with sketches and home repair ideas, back when I was still dreaming about starting a small handyman business. I'd always been good with my hands. I liked solving problems, fixing what was broken. But life had gotten in the way. Kids, bills, family obligations. Time slipped past, and I told myself I was too old to start something new. But now I had time. And for once, I wasn't pouring it into people who didn't value it. So I made a call. Then another. I fixed a neighbor's leaky faucet. Then I retiled a bathroom for an old co-worker's cousin. Word spread faster than I expected. I wasn't flashy, just efficient, fair, and kind. People appreciated that. They left reviews. They referred me. They told their friends. Within 3 months, I had more work than I could handle. I registered an LLC, Second Fix Home Services. Cheesy, maybe, but it felt right. Like a nod to this second chapter one was stepping into. I worked hard. I worked quietly. I made enough to pay the bills, and then some. But more than that, I felt useful. Not in the he'll-do-it way my family treated me. In a real, honest way. People looked me in the eye and said thank you. And they meant it. And I started to say thank you back. Not just to them, but to myself. Thank you for walking away. Thank you for letting go. Thank you for starting over. It wasn't just work, either. I reconnected with a few old friends from college. People I'd lost touch with during the chaos of raising kids and being the family fixer. One of them, Carla, invited me to join a local community book club. I laughed at first. Me? Reading fiction every week? But I went. And I liked it. We'd sit in the back of a small bookstore on Thursday nights, sipping coffee and arguing about plot twists. For the first time in years, I wasn't just James the handyman or James the dependable brother. I was James who had opinions about character development. James who liked stories. Carla and I started meeting for lunch after the meetings. Then for walks. Then for dinner. She didn't ask about my family at first. When she eventually did, I told her the short version. She didn't pity me. She just listened. "I think you finally stopped pouring into the wrong cups," she said one night over pasta, "and started watering your own roots." I laughed. "That sounds like something from one of our books." "Maybe," she said, "but it's still true." And she was right. In April, I took a week off work to renovate my own house, a project I'd put off for years because I was always too busy helping someone else with theirs. I painted the walls a deep navy blue. I installed new shelves in the garage. I even built a small fire pit in the backyard. It was the first time my home felt like it truly belonged to me. And still, nothing from Diane or Martin. Lily kept me updated. Diane had tried calling me again, leaving voicemails pretending nothing had happened. Martin had apparently made some sarcastic Facebook post about people who can't take a joke, which Diane liked and commented on with a laughing emoji. They still didn't get it. But it didn't sting the same way anymore. I'd stopped bleeding for people who didn't notice they'd cut me. And then came the moment everything changed again. It was mid-May. I was at a job site, patching drywall in a retired couple's sunroom, when my phone buzzed. "Lily." The message was short. They lawyered up. "Diane's panicking." I set down my tools and stared at the screen. So, they'd finally opened the second envelope. The real one. The one I'd left with my attorney, to be delivered if I didn't retract the first. I'd warned them. I really had. In the letter they laughed at. In the envelope at Thanksgiving. But they never thought I'd follow through. They thought I was bluffing. But I never bluff. Not when it comes to betrayal. Because they hadn't just mocked my feelings or forgotten my birthday. They'd done something far worse. something I had proof of. And now, the consequences were finally coming. I never wanted revenge. Not in the beginning. That's the part people always get wrong. They think revenge starts with rage, with yelling, with slashed tires and dramatic showdowns. But the truth is, revenge is quiet. It starts with silence. With disappointment, so deep it stops being loud. With a cold kind of clarity, the kind that shows up only after the last person you trusted stops pretending they care. It starts the day you stop asking, why did they do this to me? And start asking, why did I let them? By the time I got Lily's message, they lawyered up. Diane's panicking. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. Calm, clear, patient. Because the moment I decided to step out of that garage on my birthday, the moment I left that envelope on the Thanksgiving table, I wasn't walking away from them. I was walking towards something. And I wasn't going to stop halfway. Let me back up, though, to explain the second envelope. The one I'd warned them about. See, the lake house was never just a lake house. It was our parents' legacy. Paid off in the 90s, nestled up against the tree line of a quiet little private lake, with a dock that creaked and a fireplace we all sat around every winter growing up. After Dad died and Mom followed a few years later, the four of us inherited it equally. Diane, Martin, our youngest brother Evan, who lived out of state and rarely visited, and me. At first, we agreed to keep it for family gatherings. But slowly, like everything else in our family, it stopped being ours and started being theirs. Diane took over scheduling. Martin brought friends up there without asking. They claimed they were managing the property, but what they were really doing was using it, often without telling anyone. I can count on one hand how many times I got to visit over the past 5 years. They said I was too busy, that I never asked. The truth? I'd stopped asking because every time I did, I was told the dates were taken, or the plumbing needed repair, which I was then asked to fix, or there was a family thing already planned, one I clearly hadn't been invited to. And I stayed quiet. I kept doing the repairs. I paid for the new water heater. I winterized the pipes every year alone. Once, I drove up in a snowstorm to fix a burst pipe Diane forgot to mention until it was leaking through the guest bedroom ceiling. They called me the caretaker, half joking. Said I should be proud they trusted me with the dirty work. They said things like, "It's just your strength, James. You show love through service." No one ever asked how I wanted to be loved. What they didn't know, what I never told them, was that 3 years ago, Evan and I had a long talk. One of the rare times he flew in. We sat by the fireplace in that same creaky old lake house, watching snow fall, and he said, "James, I hate how they treat you. Always have." I didn't answer at first, just stared into the flames. Then he added, "If you ever decide to sell your share, let me know. I might want to do the same." That planted a seed, not out of spite, not out of greed, but out of the realization that maybe, just maybe, I could take back control of something they'd stolen from me piece by piece. That year, I started documenting everything. Every repair I did, every cost I covered, every holiday I was excluded from. I kept receipts, took photos, recorded phone calls. When I fixed the dock, I saved the invoice for the lumber. When I installed new locks after Martin claimed he lost his keys again, I saved the bill. I also started asking questions, quietly. I learned that Diane and Martin had been renting out the lake house on weekends, through a private rental site under Diane's husband's name, earning thousands. Never telling me, never telling Evan. Not a dime split 4 ways, not even a mention. And that was the betrayal. See, it's one thing to forget someone's birthday. It's another to mock their pain. But to steal from your own brother? That's not just rude. That's criminal. I contacted a real estate attorney. We reviewed the shared deed. Technically, all 4 of us were equal owners. But if I could prove financial abuse, exclusion, and negligence, I could force a petition sale. In plain English, I could force the lake house onto the market unless they bought me out fairly or faced a judge. But I didn't file right away. I waited. Waited until they humiliated me on my birthday. Waited until they mocked my letter. Waited until they made it clear they'd never see me as anything but the family doormat. Then I sent the first envelope, a warning. And when they ignored it, I gave my lawyer the green light to send the second. Now Diane was panicking. Martin was lawyering up. And Evan? Evan was on a plane. He texted me as soon as he landed. They called, begged me to side with them. Told them I already signed the affidavit. Let's burn this down. I smiled at that. Evan had always been the quietest of the 4 of us. But when he picked a side, He didn't waver. And he was tired of being left out too. We met at my place that evening. Sat in the backyard near the fire pit I'd built. He looked around and said, "Looks like you've finally got your own piece." I nodded. "Took long enough." He pulled out a folder. I printed everything. Timeline. Expenses. Evidence. This thing's airtight. We spent 2 hours reviewing the case. I had the paper trail. He had the affidavit. We had messages, emails, even a voicemail where Diane joked to a friend about squeezing the boys out of the lake house before they catch on. By the time we were done, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Because this wasn't revenge anymore. This was justice. The next few weeks moved fast. The petition filing went through. A formal notice was sent to Diane and Martin. They had 30 days to agree to a buyout or prepare for court. That's when the calls started. Diane tried sweet-talking me at first. "James, come on. Let's be civil. We're family." Martin tried guilt. "Really, Jimmy? After all we've been through?" Then came the anger, the threats, the tears. "You're tearing this family apart." No, I wasn't. They'd torn it apart the moment they chose profit over people, laughter over loyalty. I was just making sure they didn't get away with it. But I didn't stop there. Remember the group chat they used to mock me? I didn't say a word in it. Not until the day the mediation was scheduled. Then I posted one message. Just one. "See you in court. And bring the rental statements." The chat exploded. But I muted it. Instead, I reached out to someone else. The tenants. A few families had rented the house through the private site Diane used. I found them. Asked for copies of their contracts. Payments. Dates. Photos. Turns out, one of them was a lawyer himself. He said, "I'm happy to give you a sworn statement. What they did wasn't just sneaky. It's fraud." Perfect. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. And as the court date drew near, I felt steady. Like I was finally standing on something solid. Not made of spite. Not made of fire. Just truth. Evan and I made a pact. No yelling. No drama. We'd walk in, speak clearly, and let the evidence speak for us. But I'll be honest. Part of me hoped, just hoped, to see the look on Diane's face when she realized the doormat grew teeth. When she realized the family punching bag finally hit back. And this time, it wouldn't be a joke. The courtroom wasn't what I expected. No grand chandeliers. No raised voices or slamming gavels. Just beige walls, squeaky chairs, and the low hum of a ceiling fan that might have been installed in the 80s. But I wasn't there for the decor. I was there for the reckoning. Evan and I sat on one side of the long conference table. Across from us, Diane had come overdressed, hair sprayed within an inch of its life, pearl earrings, and that same holier-than-thou look she'd worn since we were kids. Martin, on the other hand, looked like he'd just come from the golf course. Button-down shirt, half-tucked, sunglasses on his head, still trying to charm his way through life. Their lawyer, some stiff man in a gray suit with a Bluetooth headset clipped to his collar, looked annoyed from the second he walked in. I got the impression they'd already tried to spin the whole thing in their favor, and it hadn't worked. Not with the paperwork we'd submitted. Not with the recorded voicemail. Not with the receipts, emails, contracts, and tenant statements. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, got right to the point. "Mr. James," she said, flipping through the thick stack of documents my attorney provided. "You're requesting a partition sale of the jointly owned lake property, citing financial exploitation and mismanagement by your co-owners. Is that correct?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you've declined the buyout offer they submitted?" I nodded. "Because it wasn't close to fair market value. And they profited off the property for years without disclosure." The judge turned to Diane and Martin. "Would you like to respond?" Diane launched into a speech about family, tradition, emotional value. Martin added a few quips about miscommunication and harmless mistakes. But the judge wasn't having it. She held up one of the tenant contracts. "This says you received $1,200 for a weekend rental last April. Neither Mr. James nor Mr. Evan received a share of that income." Silence. Then Diane muttered, "We were managing it. We didn't think." "That's the problem," the judge cut in. "You didn't think." What followed was 30 minutes of their lawyer fumbling through justifications while our lawyer calmly laid out the timeline. Every unapproved rental. Every repair I paid for. Every ignored request to use the house. The judge's expression grew tighter with every document presented. Finally, she looked at the two of them and said, "I don't see a case here." What I see is financial misconduct and a clear pattern of exclusion. Unless the petitioners are compensated with a buyout equal to fair market value, plus damages for unpaid rental income, I'm granting a forced sale. Diane's mouth dropped. You can't be serious. Martin leaned forward. This is our family's legacy. The judge didn't flinch. Then perhaps you should have treated your family like family. And just like that, it was done. They had 30 days to make a buyout offer, an honest one, or the lake house would go on the market. Publicly, at a price neither of them could afford alone. When we walked out of the courthouse, Evan turned to me and grinned. That was better than fireworks. I didn't smile. Not yet. I needed to see it through. And I did. They tried to stall, offered us a pittance, even claimed we were emotionally blackmailing them. But the evidence stood. Our attorney filed the final paperwork, and the house went up for sale 6 weeks later. It sold in 4 days. $742,000. After closing costs and legal fees, Evan and I each received a check for just over $170,000. Diane and Martin got the same, but not before the judge ordered them to pay back a combined $36,000 in unshared rental profits, which, of course, came out of their end. Evan and I didn't have to lift a finger. The day the wire hit my account, I sat in my backyard and stared at my phone. I thought I'd feel triumph. Vindication. What I felt was clean, like a slate finally wiped down after years of graffiti. Lily came by that night with a bottle of wine. We sat by the fire pit, and she raised a glass. To dignity, she said, and to not letting people walk over you just because they share your DNA. I laughed. I'll drink to that. The fallout came fast. Diane stopped speaking to me, which, frankly, felt like a gift. Martin tried one last dig online, some passive-aggressive post about greedy relatives, but nobody bit. Not after the truth came out. Turns out, a few of their friends had rented the house too. And suddenly, they were asking awkward questions. Reputation matters when you live in a small town. Diane and Martin learned that the hard way. I took a portion of the money and invested it back into Second Fix Home Services. Upgraded my tools. Branded my van. Built a small website. Business boomed. Carla, remember her from book club? Started helping me with scheduling and admin work. Then one day, she kissed me on the porch before leaving and said, "You know, James, it's nice to see you standing tall." We've been together ever since. Lily framed a photo of the lake house, just before we sold it, and wrote in the corner, "Goodbye to what they stole. Hello to what you built." I hung it in my office. As for Diane and Martin, I haven't heard from them since. But sometimes, when I drive past the courthouse or glance at that photo, I think about the man I used to be. The one who grilled burgers in a garage while people laughed at his name on a cake. The one who took the picture but was never in it. And I smile, because that man's gone. And in his place stands someone who finally knows what he's worth. The best revenge isn't anger. It's becoming someone they can't ignore because they no longer have access to you.
This is for Thursday and Friday. Throne, Paul Shop, High Small Nights, W Bowls. What are the carbs? Rice. It's jasmine rice. Hi, Freshly. You wear your food holy bodybuilder. Well, I used to kind of like lift weights, and I used to like do a bulk